The night was dark and the wind was cruel. Rain poured like the sky itself was crying. On top of a half-broken tower, high above the empty streets, stood a young alien girl. Her clothes were wet and torn. Her small hands were shaking as she held the edge. Her eyes were empty, like all the light in her soul had already left. She looked down. The ground seemed far away, like a black mouth waiting to swallow her whole. One step. That was all it would take. One step and the pain would stop. No one would miss her. No one had stopped her from walking here. The whole colony had watched her suffer for days. Some laughed, some turned away. She had no family left. No friends. Nothing. The wind pushed her forward like even nature wanted her gone. She took a deep breath. Tonight, it would all end. But then, wait, the voice came from behind her. Strong, deep, and full of something she had not heard in years. Care. The girl froze. Her feet were still on the edge, but her mind stopped working. Slowly, she turned her head. Standing in the rain was a human man. His coat was old and full of patches. His hair was wet, water dripping down his face. He looked tired, like life had not been kind to him either. But his eyes were sharp and full of life. "Please," he said again, his voice shaking now. "Don't do it." The girl stared at him. Why was he here? Why did he care? Humans never cared about her kind. Not since the war. Not since everything burned. "Go away," she said in a cold, broken voice. He shook his head. "Not until you step back," she laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had lost everything. "Why do you care if I fall?" she asked. "No one else does." The man stepped closer, slowly, like he was afraid she might jump if he moved too fast. "Because I know what it feels like," he said softly. The wind howled louder. Rain hit their faces like tiny stones. The girl narrowed her eyes. "What do you know about me? About my life?" "Nothing," he admitted. "But I know what it's like to want to end it all." Those words hit her harder than the rain. For a moment, she forgot the edge under her feet. She forgot the storm. She just stared at the man, trying to see if he was lying. But he wasn't. His eyes told the truth. He looked like someone who had lost everything too. The girl felt her chest tighten. For months, maybe years, she had carried her pain alone. No one had ever said they understood. No one had even tried, and now, a stranger was standing in the rain, saying the words she had always needed to hear. "Step back," he said again, his hand reaching out slowly. "Please." She looked down at the ground one more time. It was so far, so dark. It promised an end to everything, the hunger, the loneliness, the cold nights. But his words, his voice, they held her like a rope pulling her back from the edge. "Why?" she whispered. Her voice cracked. "Why should I live?" The man's hand didn't move closer, but his eyes did. They were strong, steady, like a wall against the storm. "Because there is more to life than pain," he said. "You don't see it now. I didn't either back then, but there is." She stared at him, her mind spinning. He took another slow step forward. "If you jump tonight, you will never know what could have been waiting for you tomorrow." His words wrapped around her heart like a thin blanket in the cold. The wind blew hard again, pushing her hair into her face. Her feet slipped a little, and her heart raced. For the first time, she felt afraid. Not of living, of falling. She looked at the man. The rain was dripping from his chin. He was shivering, maybe from the cold, maybe from fear. He wasn't lying. He truly didn't want her to fall. And for some reason, she didn't want to fall either. Not now. Not while someone cared. The girl's feet finally moved back a few inches from the edge. The wind still pulled at her hair. The rain still stung her skin. But something inside her had changed. For the first time in a long time, someone had spoken to her like she mattered. The man standing before her didn't come closer too fast. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone walking toward a wild animal ready to run at any second. His hands stayed open and empty, showing he carried no weapon, no threat. "Who are you?" she asked softly, her voice trembling as much as her hands. "Just someone who doesn't want to see another life end tonight," he said. She stared at him. His face was rough, full of lines like he had lived a hard life. He didn't look like a soldier or a rich man. His coat was patched, his boots old. Yet his eyes, they held something steady. He didn't look at her with pity like others had. He didn't look at her like a problem to be fixed or a burden to be removed. He looked at her like she was. Human, she wasn't, but right now she wished she was. "Did you stop me?" she asked. "You don't even know my name." The man's lips pressed together for a moment before he answered. "Because once, someone stopped me too." The girl's heart skipped. He stepped closer, slow, like a man walking through smoke. "I thought it was the end for me," he continued. "But someone said the same words I just told you. Wait, and because of them, I'm still here." She blinked through the rain. His voice carried something heavy. It wasn't just kindness. It was memory. "What happened to them?" she asked. He looked at the ground for a moment. The rain rolled off his face as he whispered, "They didn't make it." Her chest tightened. She didn't know why this stranger's story was starting to hurt her heart too. Maybe because it felt real. The man's eyes came back to hers. "But their words saved me. That's why I can't let you fall tonight. It would be like losing them all over again." She felt the wind trying to push her back toward the edge, but the man's words held her still. For the first time, she noticed the way his hands shook in the cold. They were empty, yes, but scarred. A soldier's hands, a worker's hands. Hands that had built and broken things. "You've lost people too," she said softly. He nodded. "Everyone does. But living means we carry them with us. We keep walking because they can't." She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he didn't. Know the things she had seen, the screams she had heard, the way her world had burned. But her throat closed, because deep down, she knew pain looked the same on every face. He reached into his coat slowly, carefully, as if not to scare her, and pulled out a small metal box. It clicked open to reveal dry matches wrapped in plastic. "Come with me," he said. "There's an old shelter near here. We can make a fire, get warm, talk." The girl shook her head. "I can't trust humans." He didn't get angry. He just nodded, like he expected that answer. "You don't have to trust me tonight," he said. "Just trust the fire, trust the roof over your head. Trust the chance to wake up tomorrow." His words felt strange in her chest, like they didn't belong but wanted to. She looked back at the edge one more time. The ground was still waiting, dark and quiet. But the thought of sitting near a fire, of feeling warmth again, made her chest ache in a different way. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. The man rubbed his hands together, rain dripping off his sleeves. "Because when I was ready to fall, someone stayed with me. I owe them that much. Maybe I owe the world too." He turned his face toward the empty street below. "And maybe I'm just tired of losing people." The girl's shoulders shook, but it wasn't from the cold. For the first time in years, she felt something break inside her. But it wasn't the kind of break that made you jump. It was the kind that made you breathe. The man waited. His hands were still empty, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who knew pain too well. "Finally," she whispered, "where is this shelter?" He pointed toward the dark hills beyond the colony lights. "Not far. I go there when I can't sleep." She didn't know if it was safety or danger waiting there. But she knew one thing: if she stayed on this tower, there was only one ending, and she wasn't ready for that anymore. Not tonight. The storm slowly began to fade as they walked toward the hills. The alien girl followed the man at a distance, her steps slow and unsure. The ground was muddy. and the wind carried the smell of wet earth and smoke from faraway fires. Neither of them spoke at first. The girl kept her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her clothes were still wet. Her body was cold, but inside, something else was colder: her heart. The man finally broke the silence. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice low, careful, as if the wrong word might make her run. She hesitated. Her name, she hadn't heard it spoken kindly in years. Not since before the war. Not since before everything fell apart. "Lyra," she said softly, almost like she was afraid the wind might carry it away. The man nodded. "Lyra," he repeated slowly, as if saying it made it important. "My name's Darren." She didn't respond. A name didn't mean she could trust him. As they walked, he tried again. "How old are you?" Lyra's eyes stayed on the ground. "Old enough to lose everything," she whispered. Darren didn't push for more. He just nodded like he understood. They reached a small abandoned building half hidden in the hills. It used to be a watch post before the war. Now it was nothing but broken walls and a half-standing roof. But inside it was dry. Darren set his small pack on the ground and pulled out wood wrapped in cloth to keep it dry. He lit the fire carefully, the orange glow spreading warmth through the cold room. Lyra stayed near the doorway, watching him like a wild animal, unsure if it was safe to come closer. "You can sit," he said gently. "The fire won't hurt you." She stepped in slowly, keeping distance between them. The fire crackled. Its light danced on the walls, painting shadows across her face. For a while, only the sound of rain dripping from the roof filled the air. Then Lyra spoke. "Why didn't you just leave me?" Her voice was sharp, almost angry, but beneath it was something fragile. Darren didn't look up from the fire. "Because I've seen too many people fall. Too many." Lyra's hands clenched. In her lap, "People like me?" He shook his head slowly. "People like everyone. Pain doesn't care what you are, Lyra. Human, alien, soldier, child. It finds all of us." She wanted to argue, to tell him humans didn't understand what her kind had suffered. But the words stuck in her throat. He sounded like someone who carried his own ghosts. Finally, she whispered, "My world is gone." Darren glanced at her then. The firelight made his eyes look older. "I know," he said quietly. "Mine too." The simple words hit her harder than anything else. For the first time, she realized this man wasn't saving her out of pity. He wasn't here to be a hero. He was here because he understood. Lyra's voice cracked. "I don't know how to keep living when everything's gone." Darren stirred the fire with a stick, sparks floating upward like tiny stars. "You don't live for what you lost," he said softly. "You live for what's left. Even if it's just one thing. One reason. That's enough." She shook her head. "I have nothing left." He leaned back against the wall, arms resting on his knees. "Then maybe you live to find something new." Lyra stared at the flames. Her chest ached. His words felt heavy because they carried no lies, no empty promises. He wasn't telling her life would suddenly be easy. He was just saying it was worth staying to see what might come. For the first time in years, someone was talking to her like her life still had value. She didn't know what to say. So she asked the only question that came to her. "Why do you care if I live or die?" Darren didn't answer right away. His eyes were on the fire, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Because once, someone cared enough to stop me. And because the world doesn't get better by losing more people to the dark." Lyra's throat tightened. The fire crackled louder as the wind outside began to calm. The storm was ending, but inside the small room, another storm was breaking, a storm in her heart that had raged for too long. For the first time in so many nights, she didn't feel completely alone. The fire burned slowly, filling the broken room with warmth and a faint glow. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, there was a fragile kind of quiet. Lyra sat near the flames, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her hair dripped rainwater onto the dusty floor. She stared into the fire like it held all the answers to a life she didn't understand anymore. Across from her, Darren sat with his back against the wall. He didn't speak. He didn't rush her. He just let the fire crackle between them, a barrier and a bridge at the same time. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. "You said the world doesn't get better by losing more people," she whispered. "But what if it never gets better at all?" Darren leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Then we still try," he said softly. "Because if we give up, it only gets worse." His voice was steady, but there was a weight in it, like he had carried this truth for years. Lyra looked at him carefully. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't trying to comfort her with false hope. He spoke like a man who had seen too much, but still refused to stop moving forward. It made her chest tighten. "What do you even live for?" she asked suddenly. The question hung in the air like smoke. Darren didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the fire. Then he said, "For the people I lost, and for the ones I haven't met yet." Lyra frowned. "The ones you haven't met?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, every day I stay alive, there's a chance I might meet someone who needs me. Someone like you." Her breath caught. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever made her feel like her life might matter to someone else. The fire popped softly, sending a small shower of sparks upward. Lyra stared at the flames, thinking about his words. For so long, she had believed her story was already over. But nothing could change. But this man, this stranger, was offering her something she hadn't had in years, a choice. She could stay here tonight, alive, and see what tomorrow brought. Or she could leave this world behind, step back into the darkness outside, and let it end. The thought made her chest feel heavy. "Why me?" she asked finally. "Why did you stop for me?" Darren's eyes lifted to hers. "Because I was there once," he said simply. "And someone stayed for me. I can't be the man who walks away when I know what that feels like." Lyra hugged her knees tighter. The storm outside was slowly dying, but inside her, it still raged. She had spent so long believing the universe didn't care, that people didn't care, that she was invisible. But this man, he cared. She didn't understand it. She didn't know if she trusted it, but she couldn't deny it. The firelight flickered across the walls, soft and warm against the cold night. Finally, Darren spoke again, his voice low but steady. "I can't promise you things will be easy," he said. "I can't promise the world will stop hurting. But I can promise you this, you won't have to face it alone." Lyra's throat tightened. Alone. That word had followed her like a shadow. For so long, she looked at him. His face was tired. His hands were rough. He looked like someone who had been broken 100 times, but still refused to stay down. Something inside her cracked. Just a little. She didn't know if she could trust him. She didn't know if she could trust herself. But she wanted to. For the first time since the war, since losing her family, since running through cold streets and sleeping under empty skies, she wanted to believe in something again. Maybe. In him. Maybe in tomorrow. The firelight warmed her face as she whispered the words before she could stop herself. "I'll stay," she said softly. Darren didn't smile. He just nodded like he had. Then holding his breath, waiting for her answer. "Good," he said. "That's all we need. One night, one choice. We can figure out the rest tomorrow." Lyra leaned back against the wall, her body tired, her mind full of questions she couldn't even name. But for the first time in so long, she wasn't thinking about the edge of a tower. She was thinking about the fire, about the man sitting across from her, about the fact that she had chosen to stay. Maybe tomorrow would still hurt, but tonight she was alive. And that was enough. The fire had burned low by the time the storm ended. The wind outside had gone quiet, leaving only the soft crackle of wood in the old shelter. Lyra sat with her back against the wall, eyes half closed, staring into the last embers. The warmth was gentle, wrapping around her like a thin blanket after years of cold. She could still hear the rain dripping outside, but inside, the world felt different. She wasn't sure why. Darren sat near the fire, his arms resting on his knees. He hadn't spoken in a while. He just sat there, watching the flames, giving her space. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. "You didn't ask me what I was doing before tonight." Darren looked up. His eyes were calm. "I didn't need to," she frowned. "Why not?" He poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks into the air. "Because pain doesn't need details. I could see it on your face." The words made her chest ache. She had expected questions, judgments, maybe even anger. That was how people usually reacted, like she was a problem to be solved or a mistake to be fixed. Darren didn't look at her like that. It confused her. "You really don't want to know?" she asked quietly. He shrugged. "When you want to tell me, you will. Until then, it's yours to keep." The answer felt strange in her ears. Like freedom. Like control. Two things she hadn't felt in a long time. She stared at the fire. "It was my brother," she said finally, voice low. "He was all I had left. Then the soldiers came." Her hands tightened in her lap. "They said it was an accident. But I know they didn't care. To them, we weren't people, just another mess to clean up." Darren didn't interrupt. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say he understood. He just listened. It had been so long since anyone truly listened. Her voice cracked. "I thought, maybe if I was gone too, it wouldn't hurt anymore." The fire popped softly. Darren's voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "When my daughter died," he said slowly, "I thought the same thing." Lyra looked at him sharply. He didn't turn his head. His eyes stayed on the flames. "She was only 12, he continued. "Sickness took her before the war ever could. And when she was gone, I wanted to go too." His words hung heavy in the air. Lyra felt something break inside her. She had thought she was alone in this darkness. But sitting across from her was someone who carried his own shadows. She whispered, How did you keep living?" Darren leaned back against the wall, his eyes tired. "Some days I didn't, not really. I just kept breathing, walking, working, until one day it hurt a little less." He looked at her finally. "And then one day after that, it hurt even less." Lyra swallowed hard. "Does it ever go away?" He shook his head slowly. "No, you just learn to carry it better." The firelight flickered across their faces. Lyra wrapped her arms tighter around herself. She had expected anger, pity, maybe even cold advice. Not this quiet understanding. It scared her a little. How much she needed it. Darren stood and stretched his legs. "There's food in my pack," he said. "Not much, but enough." She watched as he pulled out 2 small ration packs. He handed one to her, keeping his movements slow, like he didn't want to startle her. Lyra stared at the package for a long moment before taking it. Her hands trembled slightly. It had been days since she'd eaten anything real. The food was dry and plain, but as she chewed, she felt her body remembering what it was like to have warmth in her belly. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she felt even this small comfort. When they finished, Darren threw the empty packs aside and sat back down near the fire. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "I'll keep watch." Lyra looked at him carefully. "You don't even know me." He met her eyes. "I know enough." Something inside her shifted at those words. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a problem someone wanted to get rid of. She felt safe. Maybe tomorrow would bring more pain, more loss, but tonight, she wasn't alone. And that was a world she hadn't expected to find again. The fire burned low, glowing softly in the corner of the old shelter. The storm outside had ended hours ago, but the wind still carried the smell of wet earth and broken streets. Lyra sat near the warmth, arms wrapped around her knees. Her eyes were heavy, but she couldn't sleep. Not yet. Her mind was full of questions she had been too afraid to ask. Across the fire, Darren sat with his back against the wall, quiet as always. He seemed to know she wasn't ready to talk, so he didn't push her. For a long time, there was only the sound of dripping water from the roof and the soft crackle of the fire. Finally, Lyra spoke. "What happens tomorrow?" Her voice was small, unsure, like she wasn't sure if she wanted the answer. Darren looked at her, then at the fire. "Tomorrow. You get to decide what comes next," she frowned. "What does that even mean?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "It means you're still here. And as long as you're here, you have choices." The words felt strange in her ears. Choices. She had not had any in so long. For months, maybe years, life had only taken from her. It had taken her home, her family, her brother, her hope. No one had ever asked what she wanted. Until now. "Choices don't change anything," she said bitterly. Darren didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, maybe not right away. "But they change you, and you change things." She looked at him sharply. "How?" He poked at the fire with a stick. "When I lost my daughter, I thought the world was over, but I kept walking, kept breathing. One day, a man gave me food when I had nothing. Another day, a woman let me sleep by her fire. Little things. They didn't bring my daughter back, but they kept me alive. And because I stayed alive, I got to help the next person who had nothing." Lyra stared at him. His words settled in her chest like stones sinking into deep water. "You think I could help someone?" she asked quietly. Darren looked at her then, his eyes steady. "I think you already have," she blinked. "What do you mean?" "You didn't fall," he said simply. "You didn't let the darkness win. That matters more than you know." Lyra turned her face toward the doorway. The night outside was calm now. A faint glow from the moons lit the wet ground. It looked like a different world than the one she had stood on the edge of just hours ago. "Do you ever stop hurting?" she whispered. Darren's voice was low. "No, but you learn to carry it, and one day, you carry it with someone else." The words made her chest ache in a way that wasn't entirely pain. For so long, she had believed life had nothing left for her, that every path only led to more loss. But Darren was saying maybe, just maybe, that wasn't true. She looked back at him. "And if I can't carry it," he shrugged, "then I'll help." The firelight flickered between them. Lyra didn't know what to say. She had spent so long building walls around herself, keeping everyone out, keeping the pain in. But this man kept chipping at those walls with simple words. Not promises, not lies. Just honesty. Slowly, she lay down near the fire, her body tired after too many nights with no real rest. Darren stayed sitting, watching the doorway, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. As sleep pulled at her, Lyra whispered one last question. "Why are you doing this? Helping me?" Darren didn't look at her. His voice was quiet, almost like he was speaking to himself. "Because someone once told me the world doesn't need more graves. It needs more people who stay." Her eyes grew heavy. For the first time in years, she didn't fall asleep afraid. She fell asleep wondering what tomorrow might bring. And that small, fragile thought felt like the beginning of something new. The first light of morning crept through the cracks in the roof. It touched the walls softly, painting them in gold and gray. The fire in the shelter had burned down to warm ashes, and the air carried the smell of smoke and wet earth. Lyra slowly opened her eyes. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The room, the fire, the blanket Darren had placed over her while she slept, it all felt strange, unfamiliar. Then memories of the night came rushing back. The tower, the storm, the man who told her to wait. She sat up slowly. Her body felt heavy but warm, different from the empty cold she had known for so long. Across the room, Darren was sitting near the doorway, looking out at the rising sun. His back was straight, his eyes scanning the hills like he had been awake for hours. "You didn't sleep?" she asked softly. He turned his head, offering the faintest smile. "I slept enough." Lyra hugged her knees, watching the sunlight creep across the floor. "It feels strange," she whispered. "What does?" Darren asked. "Waking up," she said quietly. "I didn't think I would see another morning." He nodded slowly. "Mornings feel different when you almost don't reach them." The words sank into her chest like stones dropping into deep water. She didn't reply. Got outside. The world was waking up. Birds began to call from the trees. The storm had washed the streets clean, leaving behind puddles that caught the morning light. For the first time in so long, everything didn't look like it was falling apart. Darren stood, stretching his arms. "Come on," he said. "There's a stream nearby. You can wash up. Then we'll find breakfast." Lyra hesitated. Her old instinct told her to be careful, to trust no one. But the man had spent the whole night keeping watch while she slept. He hadn't asked for anything. He hadn't made her feel like a burden. She got to her feet and followed him outside. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of wet grass and pine. They walked in silence until they reached a small stream that sparkled under the morning sun. Lyra knelt by the water, her reflection staring back at her dot. Her face looked thinner than she remembered. Her eyes carried too much sadness for someone her age. She cupped the water in her hands and splashed it on her face. The cold bite of it woke her fully. It felt like washing away more than dirt, like washing away the night itself. When she stood, Darren handed her a piece of bread from his pack. It was old and rough, but to her empty stomach, it tasted better than anything she had eaten in weeks. They sat by the stream in quiet as they ate. Finally, Lyra spoke. "What now?" Darren tore off another piece of bread and shrugged. "Now, you decide." She frowned. "Decide what?" He looked at her steadily. "Where you want to go. What you want to do. You have choices now, Lyra." She stared at the water. Choices. The word felt heavy. She had lived so long with nothing but survival, finding food, hiding from soldiers, waiting for the next loss. She had forgotten what it meant to choose anything for herself. "I don't even know what's left out there," she admitted. Darren nodded. "Then we find out together, one day at a time." She looked at him, searching for any sign of lies, of pity, of hidden plans. But there was nothing except quiet honesty. "Why would you stay with me?" she asked softly. "Because someone once stayed for me," he said, "and because maybe we both need a reason to keep walking." The sunlight warmed her face. She didn't answer right away. She just stood there, feeling the breeze on her skin, listening to the sound of water rushing over stones. For so long, she had believed her life was over, that there was nothing ahead but darkness. But now there was a man offering to walk beside her, not to fix her, not to carry her, just to stay. Her chest ached, but in a different way than before. "Okay," she whispered finally. "One day at a time." Darren gave a small nod, like that was enough, like it was all they needed for now. They began walking back toward the hills, the sun climbing higher behind them. Lyra glanced at the sky, at the light spilling across the ruins and trees, at the world that suddenly felt bigger than it had last night. She didn't know where the road would take them, but she knew this. She hadn't fallen. She had chosen to stay, and for the first time in a long, long time, she was glad she had.